I'll tell you. All right, today we're going to finish up this three-part series we've been doing. First week we looked at how to age. Last week we talked about how to die. Today we're going to finish that series. But if you missed either of the previous parts, you can find them online in two different locations, either Vimeo or YouTube. Check it out if you want to get caught up, because I think there's some really good information in these. So, part 3 is how to live after you die. Or we could have called it this: what do you pass on when you pass on? Come on, that's funny. Don't be so scared. Don't be skittish. What do you pass on after you pass on? What are you going to leave behind when you are done with this world? Well, the short answer is everything. You're not taking much with you. Sorry to tell you. All that stuff you've been working for, all that stuff you got in the bank, all that stuff you got in your safe deposit box, in your home vault, you don't get to take any of that with you. Wow. Kind of makes you look at things again, reevaluate things. What are you going to take with you when you leave this world? There's a scripture in the beginning of the book of Job where Job says terrible things start to happen to Job. He loses all his riches, all his wealth, his possessions, and most of his family. And Job says, you know what? I came into the world naked. I'm leaving it the same way. God's given me a lot of stuff, and God has taken away some stuff. Blessed be the name of the Lord. We come into the world with nothing. That's the same way we're going to leave it. We can't take, money and treasures that we store up are very temporary things. They don't transfer into the next world. They don't transfer into heaven. You can't do a wire transfer of all your assets into heaven. So, if all that stuff is going to be no longer under your control, no longer under your purview, what are you going to leave behind that will last if your stuff is not going to last very long? We're going to talk about that today. What can you leave behind besides your stuff? I saw a quote by a guy I really liked. He was talking about how he wanted to still be present after he died, and he had given it a lot of thought, and he said, what I really would like to do, what I've told people for years I really would like to do, is to have my ashes put inside an Etch-a-Sketch. I like that idea a lot, but he said, now I've changed though. I've decided instead I want them put into an ant farm. I like both of those ideas because of the creativity, although I don't think either one of them would really work very well. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't work in the Etch-a-Sketch. I don't know if the ants would enjoy that or not. But I like the idea of what can I do to still be present here in some form that shows something of my personality, that shows who I was. How do I leave a mark on this world? In doing research for this lesson, I've been looking at a lot of discussions online, and I found a board where somebody just posted the question, what do you want to leave behind here after you die? And a surprising number of people said, I don't want there to be a trace of me left. They got real sort of ecological green sound, and they said, I just want to breeze through like a breath of air and leave no trace behind. And I think they thought that was a noble sentiment, but I want to say, if you do that, you've wasted a life. You've wasted the opportunity that God has given you. If your desire is to get through your whole life and not affect another single human being, what a sad goal that is. Don't you want to make things better than you found them? That's what we're always told. Leave it better than you found it. That should be our guideline to living on this world too. We should try to make things better while we're here. And if we can, some way, leave something behind us that will continue to make the world a better place. I want to leave a mark. I don't want to be gone and 2 weeks later, nobody remembers my name. Nobody knows I ever lived. That's a sad, sad ambition right there, to live a life that doesn't affect anybody else. Let's aim a little bit higher than that. I found some quotes that have to do with our legacy, which is what we're talking about, our legacy and how we live after we die. One of them is by Ray Bradbury, a great science fiction author who was active for decades, wrote a lot of great books. Some of them were made into movies. Ray Bradbury had this great quote that I want to share with you, and he's really quoting his grandfather. He said, "Everyone must leave something behind when he dies," my grandfather said. "A child or a book or a painting or a house or a wall built or a pair of shoes made or a garden planted. Something your hand touched some way so your soul has someplace to go when you die. And when people look at that tree or that flower you planted, you're there." And he's still quoting his grandfather. He said, "It doesn't matter what you do," he said, "so long as you change something from the way it was before you touched it into something that's like you after you take your hands away." Touch something while you are in this life and make it better, make a difference. And then one more part, and this is the part I really like. His grandfather said, "The difference between the man who just cuts lawns and a real gardener is in the touching," my grandfather said. "The lawn cutter might just as well not have been there at all, but the gardener will be there a lifetime." You mow the grass, 2 weeks later, you can't tell it. You got to do it all over again. But if you spend your time planting a beautiful garden, that's going to endure. That's going to be a legacy. That's going to live on even after you are gone. Think of your position in life as not just mowing the yard every day, not just doing the chores that need to be done, but of making a beautiful, artistic, creative mark on your world. How are you going to leave it? What are you going to leave behind? Let's leave a garden and not just a lawnmower. Here's another good quote I found. It says, "While it's well enough to leave footprints on the sands of time, it is even more important to make sure they point in a commendable direction." Yeah, it's nice to leave a trail, but you don't want to leave a trail that leads to the edge of a cliff that you ended up falling off of. You don't want somebody to follow the trail to all the mistakes that you made in your life, right? You want to leave a trail that leads them to something better. And so you want your life to be an example some way. You may say, "Well, that puts some pressure on me." Yeah, it does. It puts some pressure on you to live a life that's worth sharing with somebody else, telling someone else how to better get through their own life. So don't just be content to leave a few footprints behind. Make sure you know where they are pointing and where they are directing people. And I found this quote about baby boomers that applies to most of us. "The boomers will eventually have to accept that it is not possible to stay forever young or to stop aging. But it is possible by committing to show up for others in community after community to earn a measure of immortality." Okay, this person said, you want to be immortal? Become involved in a community, and you extend your life in many, many different directions, many different paths. You know, I have mellowed a little bit, but I still get a little upset when somebody says, "Oh, you teach a Sunday school class." I want to say, no, this is not a Sunday school class. This is a community. This is a community group. We've called it that at River Bend for several years now, and I'm passionate about that name. I don't want to teach a Sunday school class. I don't want to stand up in front of a bunch of people who read their lesson in the Sunday school quarterly before they came to church that morning and brought their little envelope with the boxes checked and came to sit here to listen to me read out of the quarterly. I don't want to do that. I want to lead a group that is a community. Now, what does that mean to be a community? It means a group that is like a family, where people know each other and care about each other and help each other and bear each other's burdens. That's what it's about. You know what? I have to tell you, I liked it last Sunday when we were crammed in that room over there because there was no space between us. We were right next to each other, and that's how you get to know somebody. The times when I have to preach on Sunday and I go over there and I preach in the 11:15 service, I'm just shocked sometimes because everybody's so scattered out in that service. How are you supposed to form community if the closest person to you is 25 feet away? How are you supposed to worship and feel some sort of togetherness as part of the body of Christ if you can't even hit the person closest to you with a rock? Well, that's a bad choice of words. If you can't pass them the offering plate when it comes by, if you got to put on your jogging shoes to shake hands with somebody, why are we keeping distance between ourselves? We should always be seeking to be closer with each other. This is where community is formed. There's people in this group right here. You need to get to know them because there's people sitting here right now that might be the ones who are sitting next to your hospital bed at some point. They might be the ones who fix the casserole and bring it to your house when things have gone really bad. They might be the ones you call in the middle of the night and say, "Oh man, I need to talk to somebody. I am in a bad, bad place." Where do you find people like that? You find them in your community. You want to be immortal? Give yourself away. Give yourself to other people and form connections in this group that will continue for a long, long time. Do you want to be a Sunday school class? I don't want to have a Sunday school class. I want to be part of a community of people who care about each other and who help each other through this life. Well, here's another quote. We all die. The goal is not to live forever. The goal is to create something that will. Now, what are you creating that's going to outlast you? You may say, well, I'm not an artist. I don't know how to do that kind of stuff. I would say, you are an artist. You may not have discovered your medium yet. Kathy here is a great artist. Paints beautiful, beautiful pictures. How fulfilling is that to look at your body of work, Kathy, and say, all of those came out of my head and my hands, and they're going to exist for who knows how long. What an amazing feeling to say, I created this and it's going to outlive me. I can look at the books I've written and be very proud and say, I don't know how long I'm going to live, but I know these books are going to be around long after I am. They're going to continue in print. I made something that's going to outlast me. What are you creating that's going to outlast you? It doesn't have to be a piece of art. Well, but I do want us to learn to consider the term art very loosely, because your life can be art. You can live your life in such a way that you are creating art every day. And I've told you that many times. I believe that we're writing a story every day. Every day you're filling in a page of a book. And it's your choice as the author to make it dull or to make it exciting. To do the same thing. Do you want a book that's full of carbon copies of the day before? Some of you live your lives that way. I'm going to do what I did yesterday. What are you going to do tomorrow? Same thing I did today. Wow, exciting. Can't wait to read that. What are you going to create that will live after you? How many of you have seen this movie? Oh, quite a few. I'm surprised. If you haven't seen this movie, let me tell you why you should. Every time they take a poll of movie critics, worldwide movie critics, of what is the greatest movie ever made, this is what comes in number one almost every time. Citizen Kane is almost universally acclaimed as the greatest movie ever made. Now, what's so great about it? Well, it's a really good story. It's very cleverly told. It was way ahead of its time in the film techniques used. Orson Welles made this movie, for those of you who aren't aware. He made it when he was 23 years old. What'd you do when you were 23? I'm guessing it was not make the best movie that's ever existed. Maybe it was you wrote the best book that has ever been written. You recorded the best album that's ever been made. My hero, Brian Wilson, was 23 when he made Pet Sounds, which is usually up #1 album spot, just like this #1 movie spot. At 23, can you imagine doing the best thing ever in your field? Wow. Where do you go from there? Well, some people don't ever know how to follow that up. Orson Welles never did anything on this level. Brian Wilson's kind of had his ups and downs, but I'm glad I didn't peak when I was 23. In fact, I haven't peaked yet. It's coming though. I hope you're here that Sunday. It's going to be great. So, what is Citizen Kane about? It's a fictionalized account of the richest man in the world, a man named Charles Foster Kane. And he's loosely based on the life of William Randolph Hearst, who started the Hearst newspaper chain and was also incredibly rich. Anybody been to San Simeon, Hearst Castle in San Luis Obispo? Amazing house, huge. The servants' quarters are much, much bigger than my house and 10 times grander. And he's got a huge outdoor swimming pool, and he has a huge indoor swimming pool, and he has a giant movie theater. He has tapestries from 1,200-year-old churches in Europe that he got these tapestries. It's just incredible. Well, Citizen Kane is a story of a man just like that. And the movie starts out very mysterious sounding music, very dark shots, which is why I'm not showing you a clip from it, because it's really dark, but I'm going to show you some stills. First shot, we see the camera going over this gate where there's a giant K in the gate for Kane, and we see up in the distance, there's the house. Now we're at the front gate. The house is still a mile away from the front gate. It's that way at San Simeon too. You go through the gate, and then you have to take a bus to get up to the house. And you wind for a mile up a windy thing up the side of a mountain to get to the house. Well, the camera slowly advances in, frame by frame, still by still, and we see the grounds of this amazing mansion. We see exotic animals just wandering around loose on the property. We see priceless statues from Greece and Rome and all over the world that Kane has brought to his property. And finally, the camera gets up close to this massive house, and it goes right through the window into a bedroom, and we just see the silhouette of a man in bed. We don't know who he is. We don't know what's going on. We just know he's got a big, big house on a big piece of property. And then the camera goes to a real extreme close-up of his hand, and he's holding a snow globe. And inside the snow globe is a little house with snow on the roof. Then the next shot is an extreme close-up of the mouth of this man in the bed. And we see his lips, and he says one word, Rosebud. And then we see his hand again, and his hand goes limp, and the snow globe falls out of bed and goes down a couple of steps. Anybody have steps in your bedroom? Kane does. Goes down a couple of steps and shatters on the floor. A nurse comes in. She checks him. He's gone. She pulls a sheet up over his head. That's how the movie starts, with the death of the main character. Then it cuts instantly to a newsreel, one of those 30-style newsreels, and they're recapping the life of Charles Foster Kane, showing how he rose to prominence, made so much money in the newspaper business, became a political kingmaker. The newsreel ends, and we see a newspaper man who is trying to find out what Kane's last word meant. This man who was the richest person in the world, why was the last thing he said, Rosebud? So he goes and tracks down people, an ex-wife, a lover, business associates, his closest friends. He asks all of them, do you know what Rosebud is? None of them have any idea. That's what the whole movie is about. The reporter is trying to find out what Rosebud is. And we do not find out until the last scene of the movie. Kane is dead. His empire that he amassed has turned out to be worthless to him because he's gone. He's not taking any of it with him. And the last shot in the movie, the camera is tracking in towards this humongous fireplace that you could park a bus into, and workmen in this giant mansion are throwing out folders full of paper and old furnishings and things like that can't be sold. And they're stoking this fireplace with the remains of Charles Foster Kane's life. And the camera gets closer and closer until we see this simple little wooden sled, and it gets even closer. And as the varnish on that sled begins to warp because of the heat, we see the name on the sled, Rosebud. And we realize that the richest man in the world had nobody to call at the moment of death. His only pleasant thought, his only uncomplicated relationship was with the sled he had as a little boy, when things were innocent, when there was not pressure to make money, to be a leader. That's the only thing he had to cling to. So the richest man in the world, what does he leave behind? Nothing. Just a bunch of stuff. Just a bunch of stuff. Don't you want to leave more than stuff? You're going to leave stuff. But don't you want to leave more than that? Tell me what you think of this quote. Everyone gets organized at some point. They just might not be around for it. Wow, that is true. What are they going to find in your house when you're gone? You're going to leave something like this? Think of the burden you place on your loved ones when you have a house like that. Look at this scripture from Jesus says this, "Don't store up for yourself treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven where the moths and the vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Where's your treasure? What are you depending on? What is the most precious thing you have? If it's stuff, you are in for a big disappointment because you don't get to take your stuff. Your stuff is going to stay here, and you know what's going to happen to it? A whole lot of your precious, valuable things are going to wind up in a dumpster. And a whole bunch more of them are going to wind up at Goodwill and in a garage sale. And if you were still around, you would set up such a holler about it. But you won't be able to holler because you're gone. And all you left behind was stuff. How can we leave something more than just stuff behind us? I read about this experiment that this woman did. She was very intrigued at the idea of what she was going to leave behind, how people would remember her when she was gone. So she actually took a poll of her friends. She said, "I want you to write down what you will remember about me. If I was to die today, write down what you would remember about me." And she put together everything they had to say, and it really broke down into 5 little statements. And she responded to these statements. The woman's name was Sharon. And so it said, how Sharon will be remembered if she died today. Number 1, it said, Sharon will be remembered for her kind and loving nature. She was always giving to others. Sharon would go out of her way to help someone in need, and that included animals as well. If she was unable to help, she would find someone who could. And she really enjoyed working with the elderly, enhancing their quality of life. Great, right? She said, I'm proud that that is part of my legacy. I'm proud that my friends said, that's something I will remember about Sharon, that she loved helping other people. She was kind and loving. Number 2, Sharon was passionate about her writing. She wanted everyone close to her to read everything that she ever wrote, but that wasn't possible. Yet she kept pushing on and worked hard to make a name for herself in the writing world. She was very creative in many ways and always loved to brainstorm. She got her creativity from her wonderful mother. All right, again, good thing. She said, I'm proud that that's part of my legacy. I'm proud that people will remember I was a creative person, that I always strove to use my talents and my abilities to improve the situation around me. But, number 3, her friend said, Sharon was a smoker, and no doubt that shortened her life. Well, she said that was like a slap in the face. That's something people are going to remember about me, that I smoked, and therefore I died before I should have? Yeah, that's part of your legacy, Sharon, that you didn't take care of yourself. Now, that one really resonated with me. I'm not a smoker, I'm an eater. And I told you before, this year, I'm doing something different. Yes? How much have you lost? It's coming. What is that? It's coming. I'm doing something different this year because my approach is different. Thanks to the book by Donald Miller I read, I'm realizing more and more that my life is a story and I am the author, and I get to choose what kind of story it's going to be. Now, I can choose to write a life story that says, poor Mike, he was only 62 when he had a heart attack and died. He was a fat, jolly person. Well, as a writer, I don't want my story to end like that. As a writer, I want to know what makes a better story. You know what makes a better story? At 59 years of age, Mike lost weight and got into the best shape he had ever been in his life. What a good story that is. What an exciting ending. What a happy ending. That's the kind of story I'm going to write this year. To answer your question, Bob, tomorrow will be 4 weeks. As of this morning, 19.8 pounds. And you know what? It has not been hard. I have not been tempted. I have not slipped once. It is just going great because I have changed the way I think. I realize it's not about eating horrible tasting diet food. It's about eating reasonably when I'm hungry, eating something that tastes good, but not eating a ton of it. And realizing that the hunger pangs that I may feel occasionally are just part of the drama in the story. They're just a bad guy peeking around the corner, and I'm going to make it past him. And the story's going to get better and better. And I told you 2 weeks ago when I informed you about this, I am making myself accountable to you. You feel free to say, how much have you lost? How are you feeling? Have you had any temptation? Have you slipped up any? No, I haven't. But you feel free to ask because I want you to be part of this story too. I don't want to read that this is what somebody remembers about me. He was such a big guy, I was always concerned about his health. Don't worry about my health. My health is going to be good. My health is good, but my health is going to be really good. And I'm going to write a great story this year, page by page, day by day. This woman, Sharon, when she read that, she said, I got to make a change in my life. If that's how somebody's going to remember me, I need to change that part of my life. And so she resolved that she was going to make a difference. Well, the fourth thing that her friend said about her, she was a loving daughter and granddaughter, sister, aunt, partner, friend. Although she never had children of her own, she was like a mom to her nieces and nephews and a caregiver to anyone who needed her. Family and friends were extremely important to Sharon. Great, beautiful thing to say about somebody. She was happy with that. And then the last thing, number 5. See if this resonates with anybody. Sharon had a tendency to remain in long-term relationships that were unhealthy. This part of her, although commendable in some ways, was also detrimental to her well-being. In her recent years, this meant that she lost everything, including her home, in an effort to help her partner. She lost herself in the relationship and in turn lost everything she had gained throughout her life. Too bad she didn't have a better self-esteem and see that she needed to take care of herself first and foremost. Ooh. Now imagine one of your friends writes that about you. What are you going to remember about me? That you were terrible at relationships. You don't want to be remembered like that. So what do? You change how you approach relationships. You change your thinking, just like you do if you want to change your eating habits. It's not about depriving yourself. It's about rewiring yourself so that you're fulfilling yourself every time you eat, not starving yourself. You can do the same thing with the relationships. Some of you have been in toxic relationships, and it's amazing that you have made it through. But you know what? You need to snap that thing off. You need to break that relationship and realize it is poisoning you. Maybe slowly, maybe quickly, but you can break it. You can break the cycle. You're writing the story. You're holding the pencil, and there's the blank page, and it's up to you what goes on there. Don't write yourself into a tragic, toxic story. What is your legacy? How will you be remembered? When Sharon saw what her friends had to say about her, she decided she needed to make some changes. It's good to examine your life periodically and see, do I need to make some changes, especially if you're not happy? If you're not happy, change something. You're never going to be happier until you change the things that are making you unhappy. I found a quote by George Orwell that I like too. He said, "The planting of a tree is a gift which you can make to posterity at almost no cost and with almost no trouble. And if the tree takes root, it will far outlive the visible effects of any of your other actions, good or evil." Planting a tree is a perfect example of something you can do to live on after you die. Now, if you walked into this building this morning and you came down the covered walkway, you walked right by this tree. When you leave today, stop and take note. There's a little plaque at the bottom of that tree. I remember well the day that tree was planted. It was planted in honor of a woman named Irene Cochran, who used to teach a women's Bible study group here at Riverbend. Irene got sick, and then she died. And the women in her class wanted to do something to honor her. And you know, I don't know if you've ever looked around churches much. Riverbend's not as bad as a lot of churches are, but a lot of churches, you look around and you find little brass plaques on everything. On the end of the pew, on the organ, on the stained glass windows, this given in memory of so-and-so. Well, they wanted to do something besides buy some new chairs or a new musical instrument. And I thought, what could we do that would be pleasing to Irene? By the way, Barbara told me this morning, Irene Cochran is the reason that Barbara and her husband are at Riverbend, because she made a gesture and said, you need to come. I'm going to invite you to come. Her influence continues to be felt today. I don't want to do my job without Barbara helping me. And I have Irene to thank for that. Well, at the time Irene died, Gerald Mann was our pastor, and he talked a lot about planting trees that you're not ever going to get to sit under. See, most of our plans have to do with how they're going to affect us. I'm planning for my retirement. I'm putting away stuff for my retirement. I'm going to make sure that I can live the kind of life I want to live. Well, what about after you? What are you going to do with what comes after you? And so Gerald had planted this idea in all of our minds. You know, you could actually plant a tree that it's not for you to sit under, it's for the future to sit under. And that's what the Irene group decided to do. And they took this skinny little sapling and stuck it in the ground out there one day. And you go out there today, you can sit under that tree. You can find shade under that tree. That tree will be here a long, long time. And so will the influence and the example of Irene Cochran. If you can't do anything else, to make your mark. Plant a tree. Build a wall. Do something that's going to endure and say, hey, I was here. Now, maybe you're a lucky person that has way too much of this. You have so much of this, you just don't know what to do with all of it. You're lucky. I don't know if you're lucky or not. I don't know if that's lucky or not. I do know all of us have some of this. Talked last week about the importance of doing a will, because you want to have some say over what happens to the things you do own, the property, the wealth, the possessions you do have. You can determine what happens to it. You're going to have some money, probably. Where's it going to go? Well, the easy decision is if you fill out your will and say, well, this goes to my children, or this goes to my siblings, or this goes to my nephews and nieces, or this goes to my cats, or please don't leave it to your cats. When you make your will, consider the idea that even the money you leave behind can be a legacy, that it can do good after you're gone. What if you give some of your money to Habitat for Humanity and somebody gets a house that would have never had one if it weren't for you? What if you give your money to Kiva and people in a third world country are able to get their business off the ground because of you? Or you give it to Compassion International and some young child in a third world country has education and food and is able to better themselves. If you love this place, you can. We have a minister on staff, Theo Smith, who will be happy to talk to you if you'd like to leave something to Riverbend Church. He talks to people all the time about it, and you'd be surprised at some of the people who say, this church has been very important in my life. I want to give something back. Whatever has been important to you, pay something forward. Do something that will live on after you are no longer around, whatever that may be. Now, you know what I inherited from my parents, money-wise? Nothing. Zero. My parents had no money. My dad was a retired Baptist preacher, and my mom was a retired preacher's wife. And after several years of hospital stays and surgeries and replacements and all that kind of stuff, there was nothing. But that's okay, because that is just stuff. What are the really important things that you can leave behind? Well, you can pass on wisdom, knowledge. What's something you have learned that you can share with somebody? A better way to do things. Have you ever thought about the things that you have inherited from somebody that are not monetary things, but they're things you do every day? Maybe it's the way you cook a particular dish, and you realize you do it that way because your grandmother did it that way. Or when you get dressed, you put your belt on a certain way, or you always put your shoes on a certain way, or you always carry a certain thing in your pocket. Why? Because, well, that's what my father did. Or I always read this magazine because my mother did. Our lives are full of things that we inherit. Our love for music, our love for art, our love for animals. Chances are we're implanted in us at an early age by someone close to us. What are you passing along? You can share wisdom. You can share habits. You can share shortcuts. You can share knowledge. But the most important thing you have to share is your story. Look at this quote. Carve your name on hearts, not tombstones. A legacy is etched into the minds of others and the stories they share about you. You have a responsibility to the next generation to pass yourself along, to pass on what you have learned and benefited from in this life. Look at this verse from the Psalm, probably written by David. He says, since my youth, God, you have taught me, and to this day I declare your marvelous deeds. Even when I am old and gray, do not forsake me, my God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your mighty acts to all who are to come. you can share something that will change someone's life. And you have the responsibility to do that. And the best way to do that is by sharing your story. I got a suitcase up here. This is full of diaries. They're not my diaries. Well, they're mine because I own them now, but they're all sizes, all shapes. Some of them go back to the 1890s. These are all different people's lives recorded in books that I have bought over the years on eBay or sometimes in antique stores. Now, I've told you about some of these before. I've told you about this one. This is a 1962 diary, and it was kept by a guy who worked for the highway department somewhere back east, northeast. And I've shared with you before how this guy kept this diary for this whole year. I don't know if he did it other years or not. It's one of the most boring things I've ever read. For instance, tomorrow is February 5th. February 5th was also a Monday in 1962. Here's what he did 51 years ago tomorrow. Cloudy, mild, scattered showers. Temperature at 6:30 a.m., 32. Temperature at 4:30 p.m., 47. Temperature at 10:15 p.m., 30. Temperature range during the day, 47 to 54. That's the first paragraph. Now, what did he do that day? Fixed lever on salt machine this morning. Put the machine parts together again. While Conley had the oil line on the truck blowed out and cleaned. Then Dick and Conley went down and dumped salt off truck, went up Route 17C for a ways while I finished work on the salt machine. Then put some winter mix on the back of the truck and patched some holes on Route 17C between Owego and Broome County line. Also did the same thing on Route 17 between Owego and Broome County line. Also drained some water off shoulder off Route 17 and Route 17C. Did this all day today. Put a load of salt on truck at quitting time. Expect to go to deacons meeting tonight at Owego Baptist Church. What a day. I got chills. Now here's the thing. I've told you before about this guy's life and how dull it was. And in one of those wonderful, wonderful coincidences where God drops the thing I need in my lap at the last moment. Yesterday, I was looking at Facebook. One of my friends posted a cartoon he had found that he thought was funny. And I saw it, and I just could not believe it. Now look at this. This guy says, what I want to do is write songs, but I don't have anything to write about. I'm a lineman for the county, and I drive the main road. Now, I just love that because that guy is this guy. He said, nothing interesting ever happens to me. I just drive a truck up and down the county roads. And so while he lived a life that he would say, it's dull, it's pretty much the same every day, somebody else can take those words like Jimmy Webb did and write it into a song that becomes a standard, a classic, a work of art. Your life could be art. You just got to know how to make it art. Your story is what you have to pass on. Now, how do you do that? Well, I'm not naive enough to believe that all of you are going to go out and start keeping a diary today. But maybe you could still write your story. I told you my parents didn't leave me any money. They did leave me 2 books that are worth $1 million. One of them is called Reflections from a Mother's Heart. The other one is called A Father's Legacy. Here's why they're worth $1 million. Every page of this book has a question, and my mother filled it out by hand. For all 3 of her children, she did this book. And the miracle is, she talked my dad into doing one too. A guy who did not like to write at all I think I have one letter from my dad, a handwritten letter. She talked him into doing this and said, this is important. And he went through and filled out his book 3 times, answering all these questions. Simple questions. What did your family like to do on weekends? Who was your best friend as a child? What is the gutsiest thing you ever did in your life? How did you meet Mom? When did you learn how to ride a bike? Simple questions, but they fill these out. Now, one of these worth $1 million? Because I can't go ask them any more questions. They're gone. And this is their life in as tangible a format as I can get now. This and some pictures that I have is all I have to remember them by. These are precious to me. These are unique treasures. And I will pass these to my daughter, and she will pass them to her kids. Now, 15 or 18 years ago, whenever these were done, these books cost $13 at a Christian bookstore. I wish I could give you each one of these books to fill out. I can't, but I can help you fill out your own. I have a form for you. Not a form, it's a list of questions. All you have to do is get a blank notebook, and at the top of each page, write one of these questions, and then answer it. And when you are done, you are going to have a priceless heirloom of your life, and it will be a painless way to do it. You don't have to do it in 2 days. Take your time. Do a page or 2 a day. You can answer 1 or 2 questions a day. And this is not an exhaustive list. These are just questions that I thought of. If you think of another one, by all means, add it, because this is all about getting down your stories. Don't answer with a word or 2. If it says, did you ever have pets? Don't write, yeah. Tell about them. Tell a story. Tell us what their names were. How'd you get them? Go into some detail. This will be the easiest way for you to leave something that will endure long after you're gone. You're going to have to decide who to get it to. Who is going to get your life story within the pages of a book? Yes, Kay.
My mother is 101, and I've been doing one of those books with her. She's blind now. And so I noticed if I would go to see her and say, just how are you? Well, I don't feel so good, you know. But with this book,
yeah.
I never get a yes or no answer.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, such and such and such. And then she's so happy by the
yeah.
time I leave because she has those wonderful memories.
Yeah, it's a great experience. You will enjoy reliving some of this stuff. Now, I didn't ask any really embarrassing questions on here. I was surprised. These books that came from the Christian bookstore that my parents filled out, there was a question in there that said, when did you learn about sex and who told you? I was surprised that was in there. I was really intrigued that my parents had to answer that question, though. Because my dad basically said, I knew 0 and she knew 0. 0 plus 0 equals 0. If you think that's an important question for you to answer, you go ahead and do that and add that to your book. All right? This is something you can make a mark with. But wait, there's more. Last week, I told you about the 5 wishes booklet on what you can fill out to make sure your wishes are carried out in your medical care, your funeral, who has the power to say. I'm happy to say that a generous donor has bought one of these for each of you. So, every one of you needs one of these. Fill it out and decide who is going to get your 5 wishes. These 2 documents are something amazing that you can leave, and they will help you continue to live after you are gone. What are you going to pass along? What are you going to leave behind? What is going to endure as your legacy? Well, you know what? It's very cool how everything fits together. If you've paid attention the past 3 weeks, you may have noticed that when you learn to age, it affects how you die. When you learn to die, it helps the way you live day to day. When you start thinking about what's going to happen after you're gone, it affects the choices you make right here and right now. It all fits together. How to age, how to die, and how to live after you die. I hope you have got some good information from this series. There's stuff that I really encourage you to do. I don't usually give you homework, but this is homework that will have beautiful dividends. Somebody 25 years from now is going to be so thankful that you filled up a notebook with your stories and your thoughts. And they're going to get a glimpse of who you were because you did that. Don't take your stories with you. Pass them along to somebody else. If you missed any of the previous parts of this series, you can find them online at either one of these locations. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Take a look at that tree as you go out this morning.